Bueno, pues muy buenas tardes a todos.
Good afternoon. I know that many of you are waiting for this panel anxiously, because in my opinion it is one of the most relevant topics today, whether it is good or bad for all of us working on this topic. So I have the honor to have a panel which is like the portfolio in Mapfre is exceptional, is diversified. We have people from the public and the private sectors, from reinsurance and from insurance. We have Fernando Sanchez, who's Lieutenant Colonel of the Civil Guard. He has more than 25 years of experience in missions, and he's part of the CNPIC, which is the National Center for Protection of Critical Infrastructures, which is a vital body that is going to be found in many occasions in the news from now on. He's the contact of the Spanish state with regard to the EU in the protection of critical infrastructures in Spain. He has several publications, and he is very much demanded to speak in this type of fora. On my right, I have the opportunity to speak with Javier Bastarreche. Javier Bastarreche is the Director of Insurance in Indra. We don't have to introduce Indra. Indra is the first multinational, the first transnational in Spain in this sector, and one of the biggest in Europe and in Latin America. They also have experience in insurance. He's been one of the biggest brokers worldwide, and he's holds a degree in architecture. And I have here on my left Darjit Barn. Darjit Barn has become a year and a half part of Munich Re. He's the world leader of risks and one of the leaders in the organization regarding innovation as well. He has more than 20 years of experience in security and safety, and he's been working in Price Waterhouse, offering services of consulting for insurance companies. And in my far left, you have Guillermo Llorente. Guillermo Llorente is also Lieutenant Colonel of the Army. He's been part of countless missions internationally. For 6 years, he's been the leader of the intelligence unit in the army. He's also frequently demanded for these type of conferences, and for more than 10 years now, he's the biggest corporate leader for Mapfre, not only physically but technologically. And in this regard, and I would like to start this discussion with a question that you all have in mind. I'm sure you're all thinking about WannaCry, but this question probably is not posed by everyone, but I would like to touch upon the weakest part of the chain, employees. So sometimes my question is, what is the role of employees as the vulnerable issue or the vulnerable entry point, not authorized element when a cyber threat comes? Well, first of all, thank you, Gonzalo. Thank you for your wonderful introduction, and I want to thank Mapfre for the invitation to this very interesting forum, and for the role of the country, of the company itself in such a matter, the matter of security, which is amazingly important. I hope we're not in the news, as you said. It would be a good sign of our work that we're not in the news. So hopefully that will not be the case, and hopefully we will be in touch with the operators of essential services working all right, so that nothing nothing happens, and so that our country works fine with no problem. In response to what you were asking, indeed, I had taken note about that. This is the weakest part of the chain, obviously. When we speak about security, this is about cybersecurity. If we take out cyber, we remain security. And security is something that cannot be broken into pieces. It has several elements, it has several areas, and it is a whole thing at the same time. So when we speak about security, which is the concept that in our center we handle as elementary, we talk about integrated security, security plus safety, because in English you know that security and safety are quite overlapping. Physical safety, cyber security, and safety of the staff. So it is all in the same area. So it's security plus safety. The people are the weakest part of the chain, of the whole system. And when we speak about the role of the employee in an organization of this kind, specifically the one regarding the critical elements, at least a dozen of critical operators are there in the audience, according to what I've seen in the list of attendance. The role of the employee can be the evil employee, for instance, and then we have to unveil a situation which operates in bad faith. This is the most dangerous one. It is difficult to react. We have two ways. One is to control what type of people we're hiring, which is something that we have to do, all of us, between the organization and the authority, so that we know what type of people we are hiring and what does he have access to. And the second part is what has to do with the organization itself, which is security policies in the end. Domestic security policies have to do with what type of information they will have access to, what training does the employee have, what type of control systems do they have, so that they can do one thing and not another thing. For instance, the employee that can go against the organization itself. We ask the critical operator for a security plan for the operator itself, explaining the corporate security measures that they have, what are the methodologies that they use, what is the risk analysis that they carry out, and how they manage security in general. We have several elements that they can use to support this view, but controlling the employee is partly included there. And then we have the second part, which is the unloyal employee, but who is human and can make mistakes, of course. So we have to take care of that as well. We have to carry out planning of security policies, technical aspects. We speak about cybersecurity, and we need to have technicians that are very well trained, that can prevent events and react to events, such as the ones that we've seen lately. So I want to take the opportunity to call everybody and have the ability to manage talent and to include talent within technology inside the organization.
Against the threats, and the second part, also it's of prime importance to have a culture, a security culture. Those that don't work in cybersecurity, whoever isn't an expert, has to know the one who manages information in a computer. He has to know that if he receives a non-secure mail, what does he have to do? So he has to have a training in security, and top management has to be aware in the training and security training, and it's necessary to implement it with strength. Perhaps I've spoken too much. You can intervene. Without asking you directly, you know that for the questions, Javier, what is your opinion as an insurance for responsibilities? How do you do that? Well, we have lots of internal communications ready, obviously, in all the company. In a technological company, the majority are quite aware. It's true that we are quite updated in our business models. However, a very important part of our model is cybersecurity. Cybersecurity, we as providers, company providers, and as users of our own system, we have to take security very much into the weakest link of the chain can be normally the user itself. The use of the daily devices, cell phone, in which one downloads an app. Your corporate cell phone has already a Trojan in it, or if you accept an unknown email. I believe we have to raise awareness and do a very in-depth job, and we have to be aware of the potential problems and dangers. I believe now there companies such as ours are more and more aware. To say something different, the problem, it's not that we are only dealing with the weakest link of the chain. We are absolutely dependent because there is no non-existing capacity to implement technological tools on what the person does in a company network, DDP, anti-spam, whatever you use, the filtering tools, but at the end, we can even encrypt information, but at the end of the day, we will have to give a user a password to any of you in any companies. I know you most likely don't do those things, but if it's, let's say, an employee uses the same password to get access to get access to Facebook, we are linking our security to the security that other portals might have. So therefore, at the end of the day, the same as Sarah mentioned in its presence in the table about the airline companies, the importance of communication, it's even more important in this case than which generates the password of 64, 128, or 256 bytes. The important thing is that we have an employee which knows what he has to do, and he knows that password cannot be called Iberia 2016 or Iberia 2017 the next month or next year, or March and August, March and September or so. Since this is done, probably the weakness of our network at the end is going to fall due to that. And that is something that the decision is taken by that person. Everybody of our environment, and this is really a point which really produces a continued weakness in time.
So thank you for inviting me to this Mapfre event. Unfortunately, like the last English speaker, I don't actually understand Spanish, so I apologize if I am repeating something that you've already heard. But if the question's around employees and cyber, I think it's very much a need for change in culture and awareness within organizations. So that mind shift is the best way to try and combat the threat of cyber. It's a rapidly evolving threat. There's really a lack of proportionality for cyber, so an SME is just as likely to get hit as a global enterprise. So there has to be almost a widespread view of how to raise awareness, how cyber is important, what is important for your business. So, for example, Munich Re is a reinsurer, primary carrier for cyber. We consistently try and train not just our cyber underwriters, but more generally, there's a large training and awareness campaign for all our employees, and I'm sure Mapfre and the other delegates here, their organizations do the same. But it's because it's continually evolving, as I said earlier, some people take an approach of either doing kind of walkthroughs, awareness things internally, or controlled phishing type attacks just to see how many employees get caught out. I think you constantly have to challenge the workforce to give them a better chance of combating cyber.
Cambiando un poco de tercio,
changing now from the people to the technology, changing the topic. One of the criticisms is that the development is so fast that many times there's criticism that this unstoppable speed many times produces that the technology ecosystem is simply ungovernable. So my question to this round table, to the companies which produce the technologies as well as those that consume the technology, how can one help that technology is sustainable on long term? Well, it's true that the problem is that to quite recently the risks hadn't been analyzed correctly, and I believe we are still at infant shoes in this process. As you well stated, this growth has been unstoppable, and well, I'm not a very great technician or an expert, but historically the companies, they've used or thought about security as a very small, isolated element within their technology department. So that isolation of security has produced, because they looked at security as a cost or a barrier for their development, to be able to provide service to your clients. The best thing is to encrypt everything, but that's more difficult, more expensive. So therefore, this can be a little bit the main problem of those companies, the tech companies. What we have to try is to work, starting with the design, to work with inherent security of the systems. From the so that you see that you're able to ensure the best possible environment. Then you have the word awareness. The design of the system, the design of the system, the awareness of the designers, of the employees, or the heads of projects, the time that they have to sell the right components, and to tell them, look, you have to complement those packages with whatever product necessary. So at the end, there is lots of movement, and every change in the company produces a new vulnerability. A vulnerability can be that you are attacked, and that there is a hole. Here, companies have to have systems to really safeguard security. On one hand, there's a personal security with the issues that we can do ourselves as a user, to have the electronic signature or solutions, company solutions for companies A and for critical companies. So there should be the right security policy, consulting, auditing, and the auditing is also very important so that you know your own risk and the potential impacts. So for us to provide those services means to reduce vulnerabilities, and if there's certain vulnerabilities still left, so that the response is as effective, efficient, and as fast as possible. This is what we are working on. I'm totally in agreement with what Javier stated about the security in the design itself. When one, fortunately, it's not called new technologies. A while ago, some years ago, there were new technologies. Now there are new technologies anymore. The technologies are not as new and novel anymore. So up to a certain point, it is looked up as something new. And perhaps some people believe everything that is new is good. Obviously, information technologies, they provide a certain services and a reach that you didn't even dream about some certain years, but it can be used for good things, to do good things and bad things, and we have to be aware of it. Therefore, first of all, we cannot deny that
y ahí apoyo un poco o totalmente, mejor dicho, el posicionamiento de Javier es que igual que se hace con la industria del
same as it's done with the automobile industry,
el aeronáutico y con tantas otras cosas, desde el inicio en las tecnologías de la información hay que meter
since inception, in information technologies, you need a layer of security, and in the beginning, it hasn't been done, and now we have to do it because we see now the consequences of things like WannaCry, which is what we faced the other day. In that sense, besides logically to improve our technology level, I insist on raising awareness and to create the right security culture from an individual point, starting with that, obviously all the way from the corporate point of view, is what, from my point of view, it is more important as a national center as a national center that protects critical infrastructures. So therefore, what problem have we had and we continue to have within the world of cybersecurity is that we are all connected. That is the problem that we have. Before, there was somebody spoke about interdependency. Well, we are all interdependent nowadays. So if a company has a problem, therefore, it's not a problem of that company, it's a problem of that company and those that are connected to that company, because all the organizations that are sitting here receive services and provide services. And this is done through telematic means. So if one has a problem, the rest will have a problem. Besides the technological side, which is obvious, which has to be strengthened, you have also the cultural one. And the cultural aspect is information. We have to be capable of sharing information. In our case, I know that these are important words for this forum. Sensitive and sensitive information or confidential information cannot be supplied to anybody. That is why we are here, and another type of organizations. We have to share information capable of doing so, know the situation which has provoked the damage, then carry out intelligence work, and then distribute it within the community. This does not mean necessarily that the reputation of an organization should be harmed due to a specific event. We know how to make that information anonymous and to disseminate all the information to the collective group. The threats that we face now are is a global threat, so the solution cannot be any other way than global. This is forcing us to change parameters, which until quite recently, as the information exchange, is something which all of us, also the public administration, I don't share the information with everybody. We have to share information logically. We need to know, depending on who has to get the information, what type of information. But there is a trend to leave this, and what we face right now is to share information and to do it better.
I'd like to say it's a very interesting time to be working in cyber in general, as well as cyber insurance. So the cyber security market by 2020 is going to be something like 80 to 100 billion as a market, whereas cyber insurance is probably somewhere between 8 and 10, depending on what figures you read. But it clearly demonstrates that this is a very big opportunity, not just for insurers, but also for security and IT providers. I think the biggest challenge for organizations looking at cyber is how to keep ahead of the threat, but actually is the data explosion. So there's probably, I think there was a statistic from 2014 where there was more data created in 2014 or more devices connected to the internet than there ever has been before, just in one single year. So this digitization, people connecting, interconnected through supply chains, is causing some of this cyber risk. There is no one organization that can deliver a service in entirety on its own. It's very much in need of those cogs in the wheel. And as part of that interconnection comes the risk, because some of the largest hacks like Target and others were through its supply chain. When I look at the IT within organizations, we'll probably talk a little bit more about WannaCry during this time, but one of the reasons WannaCry was quite prevalent is because it picked up on a very old vulnerability that Microsoft had in its XP systems, which Microsoft stopped supporting quite a while ago. And actually I think the reason it became quite a global news story was because it affected people's lives. So even though it was a ransomware attack, the IT failure of not being able to patch these old systems made it bigger than it actually was. So there is occurrences like that which really do bring the issues of cyber to the front pages. Some of the other issues about data with cyber is in the past IT was connected to the internet, and actually now as the business models change, distribution models are changing, especially with insurance. What we find is operational technology, or OT, is now being connected to the internet. That was never supposed to be connected to the internet, and I think some of those vulnerabilities are actually now coming to the fore, and it's what's causing the problems within insurance and wider.
Aprovechando que una de las palabras
that some of the words which have been mentioned has been the technological interdependency. Up to which point do you believe that interdependency might derive into systemic risk, and up to which point, the same as with the financial crisis almost 10 years ago, or a little bit less, in which measures were set up by the markets? What is your view? What are the probabilities that there might be a real systemic right due to a chain of vulnerabilities? What is the real potential risk? Well, you can see that I'm from Mapfre. You have formulated a question easy to respond. You remember the white horse of Santiago is a white horse, so it's white. The white horse is white. Well, the response has been given. WannaCry has been a clear-cut example. There might be an earthquake which might have affected something enormous, but there's been something in the world. Has there been something in the world which has an impact on 179 countries simultaneously? No, that is the response. But that is not something that WannaCry has told us. WannaCry has been really simply a clear proof of that. But before, in the images, we could see, I believe, it was an Allianz report on the risk. Either we have also the report of the World Economic Forum, which permanently writes about the cyber risk and considers them one of the 5 most probable risks to come true. Here we have many experts in insurances. Imagine somebody is going to insure a warehouse, and look, if somebody tells you, well, we are going to connect this warehouse to a warehouse across the street, and there behind I'm going to connect it in a circle with a gallery so that anybody through the whole city. So one who has to cover that insurance gets nervous, insurance company in other words, and the interdependency is absolute and total and at all levels. In first place, in the companies. We have to be aware that we live in a historical moment. Many of the companies that are present here, we represent precisely the largest organizations ever in history. These are organizations which are in hundreds of countries. We have all type of structures, and on top of that, the structures change and evolve continuously. So in the past, when a company had a building in Sao Paulo and in Turkey, it was impossible to think that those two buildings, that those two activities could be affected by the same risk. And now this is what happens. Paola, which is in charge of the accounts of the airlines, she said that the largest estimated loss was an accident, an airplane accident. And now, in the past, now the planes might not even leave if there is a cyber problem. So how do we get close to those companies? The first interdependency takes place within the company itself, because they're absolutely depending on the information system. None of you. Well, I don't want to say none. Somebody told me that one cannot say nobody or never. Majority of you need your cell phones and the tablets, and if you don't have that, what do? We don't even know the telephone number of our children and our parents. We are absolutely depending. All the organization is absolutely dependent, so we are vulnerable to any type of failure. And those systems, we have designed them this way, are connected. They're connected continuously. So if there's a failure, it can really take down the rest of the system. We are not only talking about interdependence of companies, that's been understated. All the companies are suppliers and customers at the same time. So this produces, obviously, that we all want to be connected with our clients through our all possible channels, internet, of course, and also with our suppliers, and to have the optimum mean production, and so therefore be able to get a better integration, that deliveries on time, and to integrate more and more. That makes it possible. That makes us dependent on our suppliers, and our suppliers are dependent on us if we share the same risk. And if that wouldn't be sufficient with the interdependency in the company or the ecosystemic risk due to the dependence, the risk which accompanies the suppliers, is that in all society we share all this interdependency in internet. All this different dimension accumulate an ever more higher risk. So we don't know if the risk is finite or infinite. So it's tremendously complex to manage the risk, because the risk changes continuously, and that is where the difficulty lies. So because we are avant-garde in science and technology, and we are right now in a time of change, what can the regulators do, which was the second part of your question? I do believe they try to do things, at least in the experience that I have of the company in which I am in the insurance, the directives, the European directives, the solvency, or the MISC, which was applied, forces us more and more that then we have a policy, that we have the right policy, identify what are the demands that of our suppliers or essential companies which need essential services. These new directive on the that have been approved, but the case is not closed, and there are still vulnerabilities. And if we don't take care of it, some of us might lose our job and be still far away from our goal. So now, taking advantage that you have commented, you've spoken about the complexity, and now reconducting that complexity to the world of the insurance. A question which many of us have is the insurance, or at least cyber insurance, is identified as the last tool of response response to a cyber incident, but in the rest of the traditional sectors, insurance has played a very important role in prevention. So what do you believe is the right way that the insurance companies can help preventing those risks instead of only being reactive?
In English, okay.
Yeah.
What do you think is we are used to say that cyber insurance is the last door to...
Okay.
For
Perfect. Okay.
So
let me just comment on that last line of defense. So it's interesting because I think if we segment the market, then an SME who is just interested in doing business, keeping the lights on or keeping their website running or their production line running, they would see cyber insurance as a great last line defense because if they do suffer a loss, they have an insurer with a service wrapper that will come and help them. I think if you go more towards global enterprise, Munich Re, Mapfre, those sort of size organizations, then today cyber insurance is actually corporate governance. I don't think you can use the last line of defense argument. I think actually boards and advisory boards have made cyber a very important topic. And actually most organizations, if they don't buy cyber, still go through the exercise of looking at that risk transfer solution. Looking at cyber insurance and how it has been changing over the years, I think it's still very competitive from SME all the way up. The focus maybe over the last few years has changed from just providing an insurance package to providing some preventative risk awareness. That can take the form of, once you've bound the risk, there may be some opportunity to educate the insured, go in and actually do some board level awareness, maybe offer some additional training or even apply some products as part of the insurance which help reduce the risk. For example, in manufacturing, there are a growing need for IoT sensors. So these sensors are actually monitoring, let's say, pressure valves in manufacturing, and these valves would normally just break, and then along comes the insurer to do some analysis or to do some loss adjusting. Actually now the sensors that are related to these valves are doing some preventative maintenance. So actually saying the valve is at a certain percentage, let's send an engineer along before it even breaks. And actually if you use that analogy for cyber, I know Munich Re and others are looking at how do we actually do some how do we reduce the risk during the period of the insurance? So today it's still a 12-month cycle. It's important that during that 12-month cycle we kind of understand the risk better and help the client manage their operations. So as they grow, their insurance coverage will grow for cyber. And as part of that, we need to try and offer them services where actually maybe we can be more preventative. For example, an idea that some people have been talking about is if we think there is a vulnerability already out there propagating in the internet, a bit like WannaCry, is there a way of actually doing some upfront, almost proactive stuff with the insurer and checking if they actually are vulnerable to these sorts of risks. There's approaches of actually maybe putting black boxes or some sort of systems onto clients' networks and taking data continually. Having been in the security industry for over 20 years, that's always been an interesting challenge for security, of having a box on your network that isn't actually it's managed by a third party. But I think if that box reduces the risk for the client, then definitely in SME to mid-market, it's something I'm seeing people being more susceptible to, and being part of understanding that risk posture. I think we're probably not at a stage where, because this is an evolving threat for cyber, we're probably not at a stage where we could do, a 3-year contract for cyber insurance, because most people in a primary market look to, maybe go back to the broker and look at changing their policy because their business has changed. It is price sensitive, as I said earlier, but I think if we collective in industry work more closely with the insured and try and help manage their risk, then we all benefit, especially as a reinsurer, because we have in a reinsurance world we are less in touch with the original insured. We rely on working with the cedents, such as Mapfre and others. But the important thing is, how can we manage the risk so that when our cedents are talking to the client, they're talking about the latest threats and having a better knowledge of that.
Una aportación de la empresa.
The companies, well, obviously this is something that worries all companies for a long time now. For 3 weeks at least, I'm sure people are more worried about what's going on. The solutions that can be given by the insurance companies obviously are not always, or not only related to the reactive part of the insurance, which is the policy, but in the first part, when trying to help the companies to quantify, to analyze the risk, knowing where it is, knowing how much it can be, and of course mitigation. The policies regarding material damages are easier, so to say, because since they are tangible elements, they can be carried out easily. And for those of us who are not technicians, the system makes it easier for us. Obviously, for a risk manager or an insurance manager in a company, this is complex because you have to get support from the insurance companies, in the brokers, get support from the brokers, and you have to be supported internally by people in the information systems units. In the end, the idea of having an insurance policy is to minimize the risk. Obviously, you don't know exactly if this is going to mitigate the whole of the impact of the first cyber attack, because you may have factors such as your own losses, your own damages, reputation, or the responsibilities that stem from the claim of the third party. Because all these civil responsibilities are a little dangerous, so to say. To what extent am I covered? The analysis of the policy that I'm going to have helps you get a good perspective on what is your situation, your current situation regarding the mitigation of this risk. What problems are we facing in this regard? We're probably seeing that there's not a record for the policies. We speak about WannaCry, or we speak about Sony. A few days ago, we thought, well, what happens with British? Was it a system failure? What would have happened if it had been an attack? You don't know to what extent this may happen. We don't know the limits of the policies at the moment, and we were talking about that with a colleague a few days ago. You have to send the teams of the company to try and minimize the risk. And if you manage to minimize the risk, then you're fine. Then you need an insurance, of course, for the rest. We're obviously in a preliminary stage, and this policy is promising for the future because there's going to be a risk there. We speak about the potential for growth of the insurance. So what is your intuition about how this insurance is going to grow? What is the goal, both insurance companies and potential purchasers? Why are you motivated to buy? Is it the legislation? Is it the risk of the reputation? Is it the package of providers selling the policy? What motivates the company to buy this particular product? I speak from the point of view of the administration, but we are facing a new phenomenon. The technologies are not new, but the phenomenon is new.
Por la inmensa mayoría de la población. Hasta hace muy poco tiempo todo el tema de ciberseguridad era algo como
all the topic of cybersecurity was something really restricted to a few technicians, but this is something that affects everyone globally now. How is it going to evolve? Since we have seen new things, we have to put in place the adequate tools to face this phenomenon, which is a global one. It does not affect your neighbor and you, but a lot of people. It affects everyone. So there are a series of norms that are being updated that are aimed at cybersecurity specifically. We have a strategy which is also specific for cybersecurity, and it is precisely there where the administration can push. However, any kind of action is not only welcome, but it's necessary. Regarding insurance, a series of new tools are going to be generated that are going to contribute to reduce the risks. This cannot be avoided. It may seem futile saying this here in this meeting, but working in the field of insurance is just another tool for companies to minimize this cyber risk, which has not been attacked so far because of lack of technical knowledge or because of lack of motivation or awareness, the lack of knowledge about the risk itself. But now this risk is obvious with the last few events that we've seen. In this regard, obviously, the insurance market is going to play an important role, obviously. So, speaking about WannaCry, maybe a more philosophical question. We realize that cyber threats also stem from cyber wars in cyberspace. And all of a sudden, with WannaCry, we realize that this has been connected to the vulnerabilities of the states to fight a war in cyberspace. So, in the end, who suffers that are the consumers and the companies. So, what is your demand regarding the responsibility that can be found in the hands of the administration? Well, being here with a member of the armed forces, when my colleagues from defense speak about this, they speak about the fifth dimension. You speak about air, land, sea, space, and now cyber. If we take cyber out, you will find something that we know. We have the war, cyber spying, cyber terrorism. So we take it to this scenario, and we can take a series of motivations and situations and activities that were already there, but now they are cyber. And we have to be ready for that. And obviously, the big powers in the world are using cyberspace And you can see it in Middle East and West and Eastern Europe, that before the war we have a cyber attack. In many cases, interestingly enough, against critical infrastructures. We speak about dependence or systemic nature, but if I don't have electricity, then everything changes. So I have a scenario of a problem of services of all kinds. Philip Hammond, who was a former minister from the UK, he said something that was very relevant. And he said literally that. In the moment that the population, in the moment they don't have anything to eat, then we do have a problem. In 2 days. And there's a documentary, which is the American Blackout, which is a cyber attack against the US that leaves the whole country with no electricity for 10 days. And you can see how the services fall, and it's dramatic. Vehicles don't move, you don't have access to water, there's no food of any kind. So this is what forces us to consider this terrible hypothesis. It is not very likely, okay, but the more we depend on technologies, this scenario becomes more probable, more likely. And we have to be ready to react, because this type of events may take place. Obviously, this is not just a matter of one single hacker. We need power to do that, and we need funding. But it is precisely against that when we have to react. A civil organization, a company, and the bigger the better for the attacker is a clear objective, both for spies or for people who just want to make some damage. So any kind of organization should think about that. Fernando spoke about the authority, and what he says is that it is very unlikely. He does not come from the world of insurance, but and I don't either, but since I am working for Mapfre, I realize that those in the insurance world, you say likelihood 1 out of every 50 years. So do we believe that in the next 50 years, how many cyber attacks are going to be? Very high, obviously. Gonzalo was asking, and Fernando was asking about the new dimensions. We've been in this planet for many, many years, and it is only a few thousands of years ago that started fighting in the sea as well, not only in the land, but on the sea as well. And there were 2 dimensions, but only 100 years ago, all of a sudden, in 19-something, somebody started flying, and the complexity of the fight was enormous, because it was not just land and sea, but it was also air. The geometry changed, because people were transporting weapons in planes, and we used to have just boats and ships, and the 3 dimensions integrated are more complex. 50 years ago, we placed a man on the moon, and there was the cyber, and we spoke about the Star Wars from Reagan. We have gone beyond that. A millisecond ago in history, this was the case, but now again, we are in a situation of confrontation, and we have to realize that this is the case. We have to be aware of that, and you can ask people in Estonia. There have been industries in Estonia because they stopped producing because of this. In this new scenario in which we have another dimension, the calculation of risks provides a further dimension as well, and you have to handle that as the professionals. I'm sorry to give you this bad news, but welcome to the world. Javier mentioned this earlier. This is difficult. Yes, it is difficult indeed. Every time I am being asked, I would like to have a better answer, but I don't have it. And in this new dimension, there are features that were not present there earlier. If we see the big technology companies, the internet service providers, the big companies such as Google, Apple, etc., probably they are actors that become more relevant in this scenario than many states. At the same time, states, and we've seen this in Europe, the protecting state and all that, the state that since the Second World War we call the rule of law in this democratic state, etc., that provides services and security. This is in the Constitution. But let me disagree. The security of all those here now does not depend on the state. The security of those here now depends on the company providing the company that provides the electricity and the water and transport. And Iberia as an airline, and Aeromexico as well. And this does not depend on the state. But this has a terrible counterpart. These companies that we belong to become the target of the states, these states that want to impose a new order in the world, or those who get organized with that aim in mind. And besides, these companies are scattered all around the world. And therefore open to everybody. Any of you would demand your technology people to be able to connect wherever I am, with the Wi-Fi in the hotel, with the tablets in the plane, and I want to be connected in the plane as well. All this increases by adding new layers of risk to the problem, and this is managed in an increasingly more complex environment. And what is the solution? Fernando mentioned this earlier, and he spoke about the exchange. And I would like to go beyond that. In the big organizations, in big companies, we must be capable of working jointly, but together with the environmental bodies. We have to be able to integrate and to share, because we're not capable of defending ourselves from big states, and the states and the big citizens depend on us as well. We should then obtain a better degree of collaboration, or the future will be difficult. Thank you. Since we are the last panel and people seem to be hungry, I think we can give an opportunity to the audience to ask questions if you want to make use of these wonderful speakers. So it's time for questions.
Lamento que pertenezcas a la parte del seguro que hay en la mesa.
I regret that you belong to the insurance part, because maybe you were not willing to answer, but you will have to answer. We have been speaking about this for many years now. The new law on data protection is coming from Europe, and there's less than a year for this to be started. There are many challenges for the companies to be able to face the requirements of this legislation, and the companies are thinking about the big premium increases that are going to be found. Do insurance companies control the whole big thing that may happen if everybody has an insurance of this kind about these disruptive, massive, systemic events that are taking place? And if so, do you have the economic resources to face this cumulative problem? A more technical question is that insurance has been sold connected to cyber attacks. If the law on insurance contracts in Spain that defines the coverage for fire, in which there's only one exclusion, which is the one that is has been provoked by somebody, then it does not include this coverage. So is it similar to that?
Me encantaría responder, pero al igual que se ha comentado, no estoy autorizado para dar la opinión del seguro.
I would like to answer, but I'm not authorized to give the opinion of insurance. But I'm sure.
You understand?
No.
He's asking about accumulation risk.
Okay.
Okay.
Just
And
wider.
he's just warned. I mean, if the insurance industry is warned about the accumulation risk.
No. Cyber as a class of business is probably I think it's officially the fastest growing line of specialty insurance. The modelling companies today, RMS, Verisk, Semantic, whoever else, are trying to build models that try and give you return periods, so probabilistic. In theory, cyber past doesn't predict cyber future, so even if you have these models, you've still got to have some, I suppose, internal know-how, appreciation of how your book is being developed, rather than just rely on a model. Systemic risk is interesting because Munich Re's view of systemic risk would be like a market-turning event. So we're very clear that we don't insure, either primary or in our reinsurance treaties, things like outage of external networks. And what I mean by that is the north, the kind of eastern grid of the US power, or failure of parts of the internet somewhere. So we don't allow that into the policies because that is systemic. Via nation state or from other threat actors, those types of risks could actually cause very wide accumulation events. The reason WannaCry is an accumulation event, but the reason there is very low insurance loss is because of the retention periods within policies. And actually, the people who did the ransom were only looking for $300. And actually, most organizations at an SME level probably paid. At a global enterprise, they were aware of the vulnerability and patched long in advance. Unfortunately, I've not seen too many figures about the economic loss. Some maybe 300 million, some even less, but most of that is from business interruption to places like Renault and those sort of plants where it stopped. An initial ransomware is then maybe caused a panic and they've turned off the system, or it's kind of spread across their organization. So for me, accumulation in cyber drives risk appetite. That's the Munich Re position. So if we continually understand accumulation, we have the risk appetite from top down to continue writing this class of business.
Muchas gracias. Pues yo creo que hemos agotado ya el tiempo y yo creo que ya podemos.
We believe that we are running out of time, so we can close the panel. Thank you.